Thank you. Good evening. Once upon a time, there was a young boy, 16, 17 years old. He came to his father. He says, "Dad, it's going to be my birthday in a month, and I was thinking that for my birthday, you could get me a new car." His father says, "Well, Michael, that's a lot to ask for, but let me talk with your mother about it, and I'll get back to you." Next morning at breakfast, Michael's father says to him, "Michael, we've decided, your mother and I, we will get you a new car for your birthday a month from now on 3 conditions. Firstly, you have to get a haircut." Michael's got this long hair, like way down past his shoulders. He says, "All right, Dad, what else?" "Secondly, your mother and I would like you to get rid of your earring. And finally, your mother and I would like you to read your Bible every night for 10, 15 minutes. Michael says, "If I do that, Dad, you'll get me a new car for my birthday?" His dad says, "Michael, if you do those 3 things a month from now, your mother and I will get you a new car for your birthday." Next day, Michael comes to his dad. He says, "Dad, you know, that deal we made for the new car, I really want to get the new car, but I can't find my Bible." His father says, "Well, it's funny you should mention that, Michael. I stopped by the bookstore today and picked you up a new Bible." Hands him the Bible. Michael, he starts to read the Bible each night, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He starts with the Old Testament, but struggled with that a little bit, so he flipped over the Old Testament into the New Testament. He's reading about Jesus, his life, his teachings, and secretly is starting to quite enjoy it. About 3 weeks pass, he comes to his dad. He says, "Dad, isn't it time we should go down to the dealership? Make sure they've got the car I want and the color I want with the features I want?" His dad said, "Now, hold on, Michael. We had a deal." So Michael, he takes his earring off on the spot. He says, "Dad, you'll never see it ever again. I promise." His father says, "Now, Michael, you know there were 3 parts to this deal." He says, "Yeah, Dad, well, I've been reading my Bible and I'm starting to enjoy it. I've been reading about Jesus, learning about his life, his teachings." His father says, "Well, when are you going to get the haircut?" Michael says, "Well, I've been meaning to speak to you about that, Dad. Like I said, I've been reading the Bible, and I'm thinking that you and Mom want me to read the Bible so I'll become more like Jesus, right? So I've been reading about Jesus, his life, his teachings, and as it turns out, Dad, that Bible you gave me, it's got pictures in it. So I'm reading about Jesus, and I'm looking at the pictures of Jesus, and he's got long hair like way down past his shoulders. So I'm thinking, Dad, if it's all right for Jesus, it's all right for me." Michael's father smiled. He says, "You know what, Michael? You're exactly right. And if you read a little bit further, you'll discover that Jesus walked everywhere he went." Over the last several days, we've been talking about becoming the best version of ourselves. And in the earlier sessions, we spoke about what helps us become the best version of ourselves. What I'd like to talk to you about tonight is what stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves. What stops us from making this journey from the person we are towards the person we're capable of becoming. What stops us from making the journey of the soul? What stops us from taking the adventure of salvation, from reaching out and grasping at the best version of ourselves, from striving to become all we can be? What are the obstacles that hold us back? Once upon a time, there was a Native American Indian boy. And amongst the Indians, it was a custom at the age of 16 to send a young man out into the wilderness for 30 days. And for 30 days, they had to take care of themselves. They had to find their own food. They had to defend themselves against wild animals. They had to find somewhere safe and sheltered to sleep each night. And then, at the end of the 30 days, the men in the community would come out into the wilderness, search for the young man, and bring him back and initiate him as an adult into the community. Well, this one young man, he set off on his journey, and for a few days, everything was fine. There was plenty of food. There was no wild animals. The weather was kind. And he found somewhere safe and sheltered to sleep each night. But around the 4th or the 5th day, food became a little scarce. The 6th, the 7th day, there was no food. And this went on for several days. And finally, the morning of the 13th day, the boy woke up. He was starving, hadn't eaten in almost a week. He looked off into the distance and he saw a mountain. And he thought to himself, perhaps if I wander up the mountain, somewhere on the mountain, I will find some food. So he headed off in the direction of the mountain. Around the middle of the morning, he came to the mountain. He began to wander up the mountain, and about a third of the way up the mountain, he discovered a path which seemed to be leading to the top of the mountain. So he began to follow the path. But as he came towards the top of the mountain, still no food. Starving and exhausted, the young boy stumbled upon the pinnacle of the mountain, and as he did, a rattlesnake came across the path in front of the boy. The boy looked at the snake, and the snake looked at the boy. And the snake said to the boy, "Boy, I'm lost up here in the mountains, and I cannot find my way down. But I know you know the way down the mountain. Please, will you lead me down the mountain?" The boy said, "No, I know what you are, and I know what you could do to me. You're a rattlesnake, and at any moment you could strike out, bite me, hurt me, even kill me." The snake said to the boy, "Boy, you look very hungry." The boy said, "I am hungry. I haven't eaten in many days." The snake said to the boy, "Boy, if you lead me down the mountain, I promise you, I will lead you to food." The boy said, "No, I know what you are, and I know what you could do to me." The snake said to the boy, "Boy, if you lead me down the mountain, I promise you I'll lead you to food, and I promise you I won't hurt you." The boy thought for a moment. Then he looked at the snake and he said, "Do you promise?" And the snake said, "I do." So the boy agreed, and the boy led the snake down the mountain. When they got to the bottom of the mountain, the snake led the boy to food. Every type of food the boy could imagine. The snake lay before the boy a banquet fit for a king. And the boy ate, and he drank, and he felt like a king. And then the snake began to dance. And when the snake danced, it was beautiful. The boy ate some more, and he drank some more, and he watched the snake dance. And then the boy began to dance, and the boy danced, and the snake danced, and they ate some more, and they drank some more. And then all of a sudden, the snake struck out and bit the boy. The boy fell to the ground screaming and crying. And the snake slithered over to the boy. The boy looked at the snake, and the snake looked at the boy. And the boy screamed at the snake, you promised you wouldn't hurt me." The snake looked at the boy and said, "You knew what I was when you picked me up." Question: what is it in your life that sooner or later is going to turn on you and strike you down? What is it in your life that sooner or later is going to turn on you and strike you down? Because we all have rattlesnakes.
So let me ask you a question. What's not working in your life? What's not working in your life? I mean, we all have something. Maybe it's a situation at school, maybe it's a situation at work, maybe it's a relationship. What's not working in your life? And how long are you going to go on believing that one day you're going to wake up and it will have magically fixed itself? Because I think we both know that that's not going to happen. So let me ask you, what is the one thing that is holding you back the most right now from becoming the best version of yourself? And if you could get that monkey off your back, how would it change your whole future, your whole destiny?
We all have rattlesnakes. They come in so many different forms. They come in so many different forms, places, things, people. Do you know what yours are? Because they're stopping you from becoming the best version of yourself. They're the obstacle in the journey. Where is the first time we hear this story? It's this story, this dialogue between the boy and the snake. Genesis, Adam and Eve. A story we're all familiar with. Yes or yes? Yes or yes? And we experience it in our own lives, this dialogue. Yes or yes? Spirituality is not always about seeing new things. Spirituality is not always about seeing new things. Sometimes it's about seeing things that were always before us from a different perspective, with new eyes. I thought tonight we might take a look at this story from Genesis, the 3rd chapter of Genesis. It's a story we're all familiar with, but let's have a listen with new ears. Let's have a look with new eyes and see if there isn't something new for us to pick up from this, something new for us to learn from it. Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the animals that the Lord God had made. And the serpent asked the woman, "Did God really tell you not to eat from any of the trees in the garden?" The woman answered the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. It is only about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, 'You shall not eat it or even touch it, or else you will die.' But the serpent said to the woman, 'No, you certainly will not die, but rather God knows that the moment you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God yourself, who know good from evil.' Now the woman saw that the tree was desirable to the eyes, pleasing for gaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and she ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. And the eyes of both of them were opened. They realized that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. When they heard the sound of the Lord God moving about in the garden at the time of the afternoon breeze, the man and his wife hid themselves from the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called out to the man and asked him, "Where are you?" Adam answered, "I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." And then God asked him, "Who told you that you were naked? You have eaten then from the tree that I forbid you to eat." And the man replied, "The woman whom you gave me, she gave me the fruit, so I ate it." The Lord God asked the woman, "Why did you do such a thing?" The woman answered, "The serpent tricked me into it, so I ate it." It's the classic tale of this dialogue we experience. What do we call this dialogue? Temptation? So we got all the saints out here tonight. What's the first thing that happens? The first thing, the snake shows up. He says to Eve, "Did God really say you can't eat of any of these trees?" That's always how temptation works. The first thing the devil tries to do is make God look unreasonable. Did God really tell you can't eat any of these trees? The woman says, no, that's not what God said. He said, we can eat any of these trees, just that one in the middle. We can't eat it or else touch it or else we'll die. He tries to show God to be unreasonable, but having failed there, he basically turns around and says, God is a liar. Rather, he knows that the moment you touch that fruit or eat that fruit, you become like God yourself, knowing good from evil. And then what happens? Anybody? The woman saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eyes and desirable for gaining wisdom. How much of your self-destructive activity, how much sin comes into your life through the things you see? Through the things you see. Why? Because we see and then we covet. We see and then we covet. Classic example. I come home from a hard day at the office, pick up the mail at the mailbox on the way to the house. I get to the house, I stand at the kitchen counter, I say to myself, I'll just have a nice, long, cool drink, and I'll read my mail before I have to do whatever I have to do. So I stand at the kitchen counter, and I drink a nice big glass of water, and I read my mail. And in between my mail is 350 shopping catalogs. So I stand there at the kitchen counter and I flip through these shopping catalogs for about 10 minutes. And all of a sudden I need 300 things that I didn't need 10 minutes ago. Why? Because we see and then we covet. We see and then we covet. The woman saw that the tree was good for food, pleasing to the eyes. How much of your self-destructive activity, how much sin comes into your life through the things you see? Through the things you see. Just a simple example, the shopping catalogs, you know? And all of a sudden you need all these things that you didn't need 10 minutes ago. And I mean, hey, I don't have any sisters getting the Victoria's Secret catalog, you know? It's a whole different set of problems. The woman saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eyes, desirable for gaining wisdom. So she took some, she ate some, she gave some to her husband. They realized that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together, made loincloths for themselves. What happens then? Who shows up? God shows up. Were they surprised that God showed up? No. Were they surprised that God showed up at that time of the day? No. Because he used to come every day at the same time, the time of the afternoon breeze. Now God comes into the garden, and what does God say? Anybody? What does God say to Adam? Where are you? He calls out to Adam, where are you? Whenever you're reading the good book and God asks a question, sit up, take notice, you're about to learn something powerful. Why? Because God has no need to be asking any questions now, does he? No need to be asking any questions. Anytime you're reading the Bible, God asks a question, sit up, take notice, something powerful is about to happen. God calls out to Adam, he says, where are you, Adam? Not because God doesn't know where Adam is. God calls out to Adam, says, where are you? Not because God doesn't know where he is, but because God wants Adam to know where he is. He calls out to us in the same way. He says, where are you? To realize here we are at point A. Here we are at point A, and that there is a journey before us. He calls out to Adam, he says, where are you? Because he wants Adam to realize that Adam has wandered away from where he should be. From where he should be, from where he is called to be. That Adam has turned his back on God, walked away from God. What do we begin to pass around? The blame, yes or yes? And everyone's blaming somebody. Who is the woman blaming? The serpent. The serpent. And who is the man blaming? Wrong. Adam doesn't blame Eve. Adam doesn't blame Eve. He says, the woman whom you gave me, God, she gave me the fruit, so I ate it. Adam blames God. Adam blames God. He says, the woman whom you gave me, God, she gave me the fruit, so I ate it. Adam blames God. Classic tale. The classic tale of temptation we all experience in our lives. Classic tale of temptation that we all experience in our everyday lives. And yet we hardly ever talk about it. We hardly ever talk about it. We're tempted to cling to the second-rate version of ourselves. We're tempted to cling to a lesser version of ourselves. We're tempted not to make the journey towards the best version of ourselves. We experience it every day. My experience has been this. There is only one immutable truth when it comes to temptation, and that is don't dialogue with temptation. Don't dialogue with the devil. You can't win that conversation. Because what happens is, just like the woman, the devil just starts to raise all these sorts of questions. All these questions, hundreds of questions, until you give in to the sin, either out of sheer exhaustion, or out of just wanting to get a little bit of peace, or just wanting the situation to end. You just give in because you're just so confused and so exhausted. One immutable truth when it comes to temptation, don't dialogue with temptation. You can't win that conversation. You can't win that conversation. And it's a lovely idea, but that's like me saying to you, listen guys, on your way out of here tonight, everyone's going to get a little bottle with a purple potion in it, and whatever you pour that purple potion on is going to turn to solid gold, as long as, when you're pouring it, you don't think of a herd of purple hippopotamus. Now, as soon as you get home, you got your little potion, you decide what you're going to turn into gold. As soon as you go to pour that thing, what is the first thing you're going to think of? Herd of purple hippopotamus. I mean, you probably haven't thought of a purple hippopotamus your whole life. You probably haven't thought of a purple hippopotamus in your whole life. As soon as you go to pour that little potion, you're going to have this whole herd of hippopotamus like running through your mind. It's the same thing. It's the same thing if I say to you, don't dialogue with temptation. Exactly the same thing. The only way to overcome this is to replace that dialogue with temptation with another type of dialogue. Another type of dialogue. What do we call that? Prayer. Prayer. But when we get in a situation of temptation, we don't pray. We don't, because we know God will help us. We know God will come and help us and lead us through it. So we don't turn to God. We say, "Oh, I shouldn't go over there, should I? Looks interesting. I really shouldn't be over here, should I? Why shouldn't being over here is not good for me. It's not healthy. It's self-destructive. I'm here now." We don't turn to God. We don't say, "God, help me here. Help me through this. Help me come through this situation, become a stronger person, become the best version of myself." We don't turn to God. Because we know if we did, He would help us. Every time. Every single time. We know He would help us.
All of life comes down to one moment, the moment of decision. And if you can master the moment of decision, you will master life. I mean, we should have books just about making great decisions. We should have courses. We should study these things in school because this one moment is life. If you can master the moment of decision, you will master life because in the moment of decision, you choose and celebrate the best version of yourself or you embrace some second-rate, lesser version of yourself. In the moment of decision, you choose happiness or you choose misery. In the moment of decision, you choose energy to create energy or you choose to waste energy. In the moment of decision, you choose to embrace and celebrate life and become your best self or you choose to waste life. All of life comes down to that one moment, the moment of decision.
What stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves? Sin. I know it's really unpopular to talk about it these days, but it's real. It's real. What is it? It's every action that is self-destructive. Everything that causes you to be a lesser version of yourself, everything that stops you from becoming the best version of yourself. The number one obstacle, known forever as sin. The leading temptation. What else stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves? Well, back in 97, I became very ill. I developed something they call chronic fatigue syndrome, and my doctors encouraged me to take 3 months off from speaking and traveling and writing. And I went over to Austria, and I spent 3 months just north of Vienna in the mountains in an old monastery. And while I was there, I learned many things about myself. And while I was there, I took a couple of classes. I took a morning class in the German language and another class in medieval history. But I had the whole afternoon free to myself to rest, to relax, to be renewed and refreshed. And every afternoon, I used to take a walk down into the village, which was not too far away and was not much of a village. But I used to walk along this stream into this village, and there was a tiny little store in the village, and each day I would purchase myself a small half-pound bar of chocolate, and then I would walk back to the monastery, and I would lay on my bed, and I would read, and I would eat my small half-pound bar of chocolate. And while I was there, I decided that I wanted to reread all of the books I'd studied in high school. And I remember this particular day, I was laying on my bed reading To Kill a Mockingbird, eating my small half-pound bar of chocolate, and my roommate came in. It was a bit of a surprise because he was never in the room in the afternoon. He had all of his classes in the afternoon. And he looked at me laying on the bed eating the chocolate, and, well, I think he'd seen the wrappers around the room and whatever. And he said to me, "Are you free from that?" I sort of laughed it off. I'm free from, it's chocolate. Of course I'm free from it. What are you talking about? He went over to his desk. He'd forgotten a book for one of his classes, and he picked up the book. And then he turned around, he went to leave, but just as he got to the threshold of the door, he turned around again. He looked at me again. He said, "No, really, are you free from that?" Didn't wait for my reply, just turned around and left. I sort of laughed it off again, but as the afternoon began to pass, the question began to nag on my mind. Am I free from this? Am I really free from this? They say 28 days is a critical period for an addiction. I wasn't able to really convince myself that I was free from it. So I decided that I would give up chocolate for 1 whole month to prove to everybody that I was free from chocolate. Beginning, of course, the next day. So that evening I had, there were several half-eaten bars of chocolate around the room and all sorts of other types of candy. So that night I ate all of that, you know. I didn't want it to be around in the days ahead, you know, as a temptation. So that night I ate all of that and began my 1-month chocolate fast the next day. And the first day everything was fine. I just ate more food, you know. I ate so much food I couldn't possibly eat any chocolate. Second day was fine, third day was fine. About halfway through the fourth day, I started to experience these tormenting urges of the flesh, crying out, demanding to be satisfied. Now don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. It insults my intelligence. About 2 hours later, I found myself just passing by the store in the village, purchasing a small half-pound bar of chocolate. And about an hour later, I was laying on my bed, devouring that small half-pound bar of chocolate, finishing up To Kill a Mockingbird. It occurred to me at this point that I might have a little bit of a problem. But with renewed optimism, I resolved to begin again the next day. This time, everything was fine for about 6 days. And I'm in my German class on the morning of the 6th day, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, those tormenting urges of the flesh begin crying out, demanding to be satisfied. About an hour later, I found myself devouring a small half-pound bar of chocolate on the way home from the store. And at this point, I realized, yeah, maybe I do have a bit of a problem here. And only on the third occasion was I able to give up chocolate for the whole month. Only on the third occasion. My point is this: addiction. We all have them. We all have them. Some of us are just better at hiding them than others, you know? And the temptation is to say, oh, I don't have any of the big ones, you know? Whatever they are, you know, maybe drugs, alcohol, gambling. Oh, I don't have any of the big ones. Yeah, maybe you're not rolling around every afternoon like a drunk. Maybe you're just better at hiding yours than some other people. But we all have them. We all have them, and sometimes they come in small sizes. But if you get enough of the small ones together, they do exactly the same thing as the big ones. What they do is they stifle our will. They stifle our will. They lock us up. They cage us over here. They stop us from making the journey. They stop us from becoming the best version of ourselves. Addictions. What are yours? What are your addictions? You know, some people are addicted to coffee. It's like the day can't begin unless they've got the black sludge running through their veins, you know? Coffee. Some people are addicted, obviously, smoking, drinking, gambling, pornography, drugs. What about this one? Some people are addicted to always having everything in the house in the right place. You know someone like that? Yeah. Just so you know, if you elbow the person next to you, I can see that from up here, you know? But I suspect that the person who just elbowed you, and you know who they are, I suspect that the person who just elbowed you is addicted to always having the remote control for the television set. Honey, it doesn't work if I'm not holding it. It's new technology.
You know, that question from my roommate was a question that took me off guard. Are you free? And so I got to ask you the question, because I spent a lot of time thinking about it in the last 7 years or so. Are you free? And what are the habits? What are the addictions? What are the self-destructive behaviors that are stopping you from being all you can be? What are the habits? What are the addictions? What are the self-destructive behaviors that are stopping you, holding you back from becoming the best version of yourself? And imagine, what would your life be like? How would your life be different if you were free from those habits, from those addictions, from those self-destructive behaviors? Are you free? And what's stopping you from being free?
Addiction. What are yours? What are yours? Because it's one of the main things that stops us from making the journey. One of the main things that stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves. Why? Because it stifles our will. Have you ever been to the zoo and seen a gorilla? You know, you go to the zoo, you see the gorilla, you see it's been in the zoo for like 20 years. You know, they've got this really little pretty plaque right next to the cage, and it says, you know, the gorilla has been part of the zoo family for 20 years. You know, they don't say that they drag this thing out of its natural environment and stuck it in a cage and it's been in there for 20 years, you know. The gorilla has been part of the zoo family for 20 years. And you look in the gorilla's eyes, and it's got like this dazed, glazed, amazed look. You look in the gorilla's eyes, it just looks, you know? Just looks. I see a few people here with a similar look. The sad thing is that if you open the gorilla's door, if you open the gorilla's cage door, it won't come out. It's become so used to its environment, it won't come out. It's become so comfortable with its environment and everything that goes with it, it won't come out. And if by some freak chance it does come out of the open cage door, you know what it'll do? It'll wander around for about 5 minutes, and then do you know what it'll do? It'll go right back in. It'll go right back in. And people, so often we're the same. We struggle to see it in ourselves. We see it very clearly in other people. We struggle to see it in ourselves, but we see it very clearly in other people. Perfect example is you find this young woman, you know. She's a wonderful young woman. She's 20, early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and she's dating this guy who is an absolute loser, you know. Has everyone seen this situation? Yes or yes? Everyone's seen it. Everybody knows except who? Everybody knows except her. Everybody knows except her. And she won't break up with him, will she? Why? Because her will has been broken. It's been crushed. She's been stifled. She's been caged up over here at point A. The cage door is wide open, but she won't come out. And if by some chance she does come out, she'll wander around for 5 minutes, decide it was a bad idea, and go straight back in. And go straight back in. We're all the same. In some areas of our lives, our will has been crushed. It's been broken. It's been beat down. In some areas of our lives, we are that gorilla in that cage. And God wants to call us out of that. He wants to liberate us. He wants to put us back in our natural environment so we can thrive. So we can thrive. So we can live life to the fullest. So we can experience the abundant life. So that we can become all we were created to be. So that we can become the best version of ourselves. What stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves? Temptation, sin, addiction. What else? Critics. Critics. Do you know any? You know, I've been traveling the world the last 10 years, 50 countries. The funny thing is, you know, I've never seen a statue of a critic. I've been looking. I thought I found one a few weeks ago. I really did. I thought I found a statue of a critic a few weeks ago. It was in a church, actually, which is not really surprising because there tends to be a lot of critics in church, you know? You don't think so? Ask your pastor. Tends to be a lot of critics in church. I was in this church and I found this statue of this critic, and I went over and I leant up against him. I discovered he was still alive. The problem is with the critics, it's so difficult to tell, you know, if they're alive or dead. Why? Because they don't do anything. They don't do anything. They're too busy criticizing. The world doesn't need any more critics. Your family doesn't need any more critics. Your relationships don't need any more critics. Your church doesn't need any more critics. Your community doesn't need any more critics. The world doesn't need any more critics. Don't be a critic. Don't be a critic. But the real tragedy in all of this is that we let our critics determine the direction of our lives. We let our critics determine the direction of our lives. Now, I know what some of you are thinking to yourself. Some of you are thinking you would never let the critics determine the direction of your life. Some of you are thinking you're stronger than that. You have better sense than that. You would never let the critics determine the direction of your life. Well, maybe you would and maybe you wouldn't. Let's put it to the test, eh? In one day, you get 10 compliments and 1 criticism. What do you go to bed thinking about? Every time. Every time. That's the tragedy. Who are these self-appointed kings of non-existent kingdoms, and why do we give them so much power in our lives? Who are they? Let me give you an example so you know next time you come up against the critic. Let me give you an example so you know what you're dealing with. We've got this guy and he weighs 685 pounds. So he's a big boy, you know? Pretty big boy, you know? And he's sitting in his big lazy boy recliner chair. Okay, now he's immersed in his big lazy boy recliner chair. Okay? And on one side, he's got 24 cold cans of beer. And on the other side, he has got a 300-ounce bag of Doritos. I don't know if you've noticed, but they just keep getting bigger. You know, you go to the supermarket and what used to be 3 shelves is now 1 bag of Doritos. You know? Anytime now, you're going to go down to the supermarket, and you know how they had those end-of-aisle displays? There's just going to be 1 big bag of Doritos there. You know? It's going to have a note on it. $29.99 plus $9.99 delivery. You know? So anyway, we got this guy, 685 pounds, immersed in his lazy boy recliner chair. One side he's got 24 cold cans of beer. The other side he's got his 300-ounce bag of Doritos. He's sitting in front of his 127-inch idiot box. Okay? What is he watching? Yes, he's watching the sports. What in particular is he watching? Yes, he's watching the basketball. Now, this is back during the golden days of the Chicago Bulls, you know, which, by the way, are over, you know. And Michael Jordan was playing, and all of a sudden, Michael Jordan misses a shot. All of a sudden, Michael Jordan misses a shot, and this guy is screaming at the television set like Michael Jordan was actually in the room. He is screaming. What were you thinking, Jordan? Anyone could have made that shot. If he just would have stepped to the left, moved to the right, ducked under his arm, done a triple somersault, and done a backward slam, anyone could have made that shot. Jordan, what were you thinking? Anyone could have made that shot. I could have made that shot, Jordan, if only I could get up out of my chair. It's what I like to call a self-appointed king of a non-existent kingdom. Who gives him the right to criticize Michael Jordan? So next time you get bogged down by the critics, next time you get discouraged by the critic, I want you to think of this consummate critic. I want you to carry on regardless. Carry on regardless. But the truth is the critics, they get us down. They get us down. They discourage us. Nothing sucks the energy out of life like a critic. Nothing destroys passion, energy, enthusiasm, excitement like a critic. Don't be a critic. I got lots of critics in my life, you know. I have got lots of critics. You know, I turn my computer on in the morning, you know. It says, you've got mail, you know, 427 messages. You know. I got this new program now, you know, that works out which ones are critics and which ones aren't, you know. Just puts them straight in the trash. But seriously, I mean, I've got some serious critics too, you know. I got some not so serious critics too. I got this one woman, she comes up to me after a talk a few weeks ago. She said, yeah, Mr. Kelly, I read your new book, and I just wanted to tell you that, well, I liked your haircut better on the last book. Thank you. One of my other favorites is this guy sends me an email. He says, Dear Mr. Kelly, I was wondering, did you realize there's a typographical error on page 57? I mean, that's all. He doesn't say what the typographical error is, you know? That's it. So I emailed back, I said, no, I didn't. He writes again, yeah, on page 57, paragraph 3, line 4, there's a typographical error. It says there, T-H-E-R-E, and it should say there, T-H-E-I-R. So I email him back. Thank you. Any other thoughts on the book? No, but seriously, you know, I've got critics also who, they get me down. They get me down, like you, like anybody. And it's hard to get back up from the discouragement of criticism. It's difficult. I got these words I like to take my 10 minutes of silence, reflect upon when the critics get me down. They are words that were written by a Harvard graduate back in the 60s, and that were made famous by Mother Teresa in the 80s when she placed them in enormous lettering on the wall of one of her orphanages in Calcutta. People are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you'll win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. Big people with even bigger ideas will be shot down by small people with even smaller minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Be the underdog anyway. What you spent years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you try to help them. Help them anyway. Give the world the best you've got, and you may get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you've got anyway. Do not allow the critics to determine the direction of your life. Do not allow the critics to determine the direction of your life. And how do we do it? I mean, it's easy. It's like one of those potions, you know. Do not allow the critics to determine the direction of your life. As soon as you got to pour the potion, what's critics come marching through your head? So how do we do it? Only by coming to this place, only by having the courage to come to this place, to go into the classroom of silence and say, who am I? Strengths, weaknesses, faults, failings, flaws, defects, talents, abilities. Like we talked about yesterday, only by having the courage to ask the big question, God, what do you think I should do? Only by asking, which path is going to help me become the best version of myself? Only by having some sense of who we were created to be are we able to overcome the critics. Because otherwise, we're just out there, we're just wandering around, lost, dazed, glazed, amazed, don't know what we're doing, where we're going, what it's all about. It's like when you get lost, you know, you stop at the gas station, you know, after about half an hour, your wife nags you, you know, finally you stop at the gas station. You know, you go in, you ask the guy, listen, we're lost, we're trying to find this place. And he says, yeah, no problem, just go out here, go left, go right, it's on your left. You think, perfect, off you go. You know, go out, go left, go right, go left. The only thing is you don't know that he just arrived from Pakistan yesterday. And he doesn't know any better than you do. Yeah, but we automatically assume that he's an expert. We automatically assume that our critics are experts. We automatically assume that our critics know what they're talking about. And they don't. Most of the time, they have not the foggiest idea who they are or where they're going, and they haven't taken even a moment to consider who you are and who you're being called to be and what it's going to take to make you the best version of yourself. They're just talking. Do not allow these self-appointed kings of non-existent kingdoms to determine the direction of your life. The only way to do that, take the time, step into the classroom of silence, work out who you are, what you're here for, and make the journey.
One evening, an old Native American told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves. One is evil. It is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute, and then he asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old man smiled and simply replied, "The one you feed, whichever one you feed."
What stops us from making the journey? What stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves? Sin, temptation, addiction, critics. But most of all, the biggest obstacle of all, the number one thing that stops us from becoming all we can be? Fear. Fear. We're afraid. We're afraid of just about everything. What is the number one thing? What is the most common thing Jesus says while he was alive? Anybody? Do not be afraid. It's like he says it to everyone he meets. "Hi, I'm Jesus. Do not be afraid." You know? The most common phrase that appears in the New Testament, "Do not be afraid." The most common phrase that appears in the Old Testament, "Be not afraid." Collectively, between the Old and the New Testament, this phrase appears more than 1,000 times in the Bible. You think he's trying to get a message across? You think he's trying to say something to us? Why? Over and over throughout salvation history, has God's message to humanity been, "Do not be afraid"? Why over and over and over throughout salvation history has God's message to humanity, to you and I, been, "Do not be afraid"? Two reasons. Number one, because he senses that we are. He senses that we are afraid. He senses that we are like that caged gorilla, backed up over here into a corner. He senses that we're backed up here in a corner. He senses that we're caged in like the gorilla. He knows the cage door is wide open. But he senses our fear. And so he says to us, "Do not be afraid." Number one reason. Number two reason, throughout salvation history, over and over, throughout your life, throughout my life, God's message to us is, "Do not be afraid." Why? Because he knows more than anybody else that the measure of your life will be the measure of your courage. The measure of your life will be the measure of your courage. Why? Because everything in life requires courage. Everything in life requires courage. Whether it is playing football or coaching football. Whether it's crossing the room to ask a woman on a date or rekindling a love that has grown cold. Whether it's your first day in college or your first day back at college after 20 years. Whether it's your first day at your first job or your first day at a new job or starting a new business. Whether it's buying a home or getting married. Struggling to overcome an addiction, battling with a potentially fatal disease, or just coming humbly before your God in prayer and asking the big question, "God, what do you think I should do?" Life requires courage. Everything in life requires courage. And the measure of your life will be the measure of your courage. Go home tonight, ask yourself, who are the 10 people you most admire in history? Go home tonight, ask yourself, who are the 10 people you most admire in history? Pick them out of the history books. And then ask yourself, who would they be without courage? The answer, you wouldn't even know their names. They wouldn't be in the history books. The measure of their lives is the measure of their courage. And that's why throughout history, God's message to humanity has been, "Do not be afraid." Do not be afraid. Because he knows what we're capable of. He knows what the best version of you looks like. He knows what the best version of you looks like. And that's what he wants for you. That's his dream for you. That's his vision for you. And that's why he says to you, don't be afraid. Take time. Get some time in the classroom of silence. Work out who you are, what you're here for. Work out who you are, work out who you're capable of becoming. Get a good look at what the best version of yourself looks like. And then go out and fight for that best version of yourself. Defend that best version of yourself. Choose that best version of yourself. Fill your life with courage. Why? Because the measure of your life will be the measure of your courage. The measure of your life will be the measure of your courage. Thank you.